Let's learn some more adjectives in the category of nuevo and mismo. These adjectives are used to identify which item we're talking about in a conversation. For example, something can be the first item, the only item, or the correct item. The scene that we're going to study today involves Joel's neighbors in the apartment to the west. Now, these neighbors have a custom of putting weather vanes on top of their chimneys. There are many apartments, but Joel finds the first 4 apartment buildings the most interesting. The weather vane on the top of the first apartment looks like a pink female horse, and Joel calls it a mare. The word for first is primero. Note that primero is a lot like bueno in that it gets shortened to primer when it's used right before a masculine noun. For example, to say first place, we would say primer lugar. Actually, that example brings up an example of a Spanish idiom that's a lot like the equivalent English idiom. So let's say, for example, that you're listing reasons for doing something. You might begin by saying, well, in the first place, and then continuing. In Spanish, it's the exact same thing. Joel says, en primer lugar. Now, how about the second weather vane? Well, the weather vane on this second apartment building is of a horse that looks like it's choking on the smoke that's pouring out of the chimney. Joel calls this horse a goon, and his word for second is segundo. The third weather vane depicts a horse with an apple-shaped head and a stern expression. This horse reminds Joel of Ser, who happens to be the person who owns this third apartment building. His word for third is tercero. The horse on the fourth apartment building has giant green bumps that Joel thinks of as warts. His word for fourth is cuarto, kind of like wart. Now let's go into the apartment buildings themselves. In the first building, we've already been introduced to the new waving neighbor, nuevo, and the girl who stares in the mirror, mismo. These both live on the bottom of the first apartment building. On the top floor lives the strangest human being Joel has ever seen. This boy has a horn growing from his forehead like a unicorn, and he's the only person in Joel who has this condition. Since he's so unique, Joel calls him único. This sounds a bit like unicorn, but it means only or unique. So, for example, the only man would be el único hombre. With this kid is a group of kids playing a game that they like to call Ultimate Frisbee, but it isn't normal Ultimate Frisbee. Their version of Ultimate is more like hot potato. The last person holding the Frisbee loses. So they pass it to each other very quickly, hoping not to be the last. The word for last is último. All of these words in this first apartment, nuevo, mismo, único, and último, are generally used before a noun. For example, nuevo hombre, último hombre, etc. Let's take the example in the first part. That would be en la primera parte.
En la primera parte.
We could turn it to in the third part or en la tercera parte.
En la tercera parte.
Maybe in the last part, en la última parte.
En la última parte.
Or in the only part, en la única parte.
En la única parte.
Now, in the fourth apartment building that Joel's looking at, this has a different kind of adjective. They tend to be used after a noun instead of before. When Joel looks at this fourth apartment building, he likes to critique the neighbor's choice of furniture. One neighbor has very old, sad-looking furniture. Another has furniture that's very plain, boring, and common, because too many people have furniture like this. And it's all on black wheels and rolls around the apartment. But one neighbor has very comfortable-looking, new, classy furniture. Joel thinks that this neighbor made the correct decision. So Joel's adjective for the old, sad version is pasado, which means previous or from the past. The simple, plain, common version is called general, spelled exactly like the word general in English. And it means general, but remember to stress the last syllable, ral, which might remind you that this furniture rolls around, so general. But the right or correct furniture is called correcto. Now we need to practice using these words after nouns. For example, the last year is el año pasado. The general people is la gente general. And the correct house is la casa correcta. Now make sure to practice all of these which adjectives. Practice using most of them before a noun, such as la primera casa, la segunda casa, la única casa, etc. But also practice using correcto, general, and pasado after nouns, la casa correcta, la casa general, and la casa pasada.